Well, I want to thank Kansas Farmers Union for inviting me, all you people for taking time out of your day to come listen to me and the rest of the agenda. You know, it means a lot to me because time is very important. So it's great seeing a full house. I really appreciate, well, first of all, I apologize for the technical difficulties. This is why farmers farm. And also, I really appreciated Dania's presentation earlier, not just for the content, but she put you people on the edge of your seats and had you very nervous. And we're going to continue that for the next 2 hours. Sorry to tell you. What I'm about to share is a lot of my personal journey as a farmer, as a dad, as somebody suffering from depression, and somebody trying to survive in rural America. I have a PowerPoint set up. I have no clue if I will follow it, because when you start telling a story instead of giving a presentation, there's no telling where it goes. And this is not an easy story to share. I have not been sharing this in depth for a long time. I just as well strip naked in front of you, because I'm going to bare my soul. I'm going to share things that I don't really care to share. But we're at a point in time that this story has to be told. We have to fix the greatest people. We have to quit putting this under the rug, sweeping it under the rug, and not thinking about it, not talking about it. It has to be addressed. And for me, it became apparent several years ago, just a little bit of brief history of how I ended up here is I was a very early adopter of no-till when I was still a large row crop farmer. I started no-tilling in 1993. I was the first person in Kansas to plant cover crops in 1996. Because of that, I got started to ask to speak at conferences in the early 2000s. And then I went broke after I lost my crop insurance, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So as a presenter, when you're financially strapped, your presentation starts to not make sense. I show all these beautiful pictures, but I'm going broke. Well, how is that? So I had to be honest on stage about my financial situation, which wasn't pleasant. And nobody said anything. I got a few head shakes in the crowd, but that would be it, mostly just stares. But in the bathroom, in the parking lot, the next day on the phone, I would get a call or somebody would walk up to me, and this 60-year-old farmer would suddenly start to tear up. And I realized it wasn't about cover crops. He was wanting to tell his story. And this started happening more and more and more until I realized that I wasn't the only one that was broke, depressed, and suicidal. And so somebody has to tell this story. So this is not my choice. I want to be home with my cows. But here, we all have been given a journey, and this is mine. So please bear with me as we go through this. So hello from Severy, Kansas. How many of you all been to the beautiful downtown metropolis of Severy, Kansas? You'll get to see a picture of it later on. We are blessed. We live on the edge of the Flint Hills, the largest unbroken tract of prairie left on the planet. We couldn't be more blessed to live where we do. This is a look of our farm. Again, just beautiful scenery. These are the two caretakers of the farm. Lynette works full-time for the Ecdysis Foundation and Dr. Jonathan Lundgren. If you happened to be in Manhattan last week at the Governor's Water Conference, Jonathan rocked the house with his keynote speech. So I am the full-time caretaker of the farm. Lynette's there part-time. And like many farms, we're understaffed and overworked. We have an event center on our farm. When we relocated a few years ago, education is big for us. We wanted a place for people to gather. So we have that. We have an Airbnb on the farm. Lots of ways you can come hang out with us. Our main enterprises, we do grass-finished beef and lamb. We direct market everything now. We run the herds together in a flurd. We also have pastured pigs, sheep, chickens, laying hens. This is Leonard Skinner. He is the protector of free birds, ducks, turkey, and no telling what else you'll find when you come visit us. Our mission is to grow nutrient-dense food without hindering the next generation's ability to do so. a quick look at my old life of row crop farming. In 2000, I was growing 3,200 acres of Roundup Ready corn and soybeans. I was no-till, but I was very conventional. And then I found cover crops, and that started me on a journey that got me here today through ups and downs. And the thing that the cover crops did for me as a farmer, besides they made my farm more beautiful and attracted life and diversity, but for the first time in my life as a near 40-something-year-old farmer, I found out that soil is supposed to be alive. That had never been taught to me before. And I think it's really sad that most farmers have no understanding of the system on which they live and steward. And as I said, I am one. I am a single employee, so if you see me talking to myself, don't worry, it's just a staff meeting. And I'm ADD, so that's why my presentation will tend to just go who knows where. I've struggled being focused. And my mind is like an internet browser. I've got 19 tabs open all the time, 3 of them are frozen, and I have no idea where the music is coming from. So welcome to my brain. So yeah, we're gonna talk today about mental health in rural America, and as the journey goes forward, this is going to come together. But I have found through a conversation a few years ago when I really hit bottom for the second time that we talk about regenerative agriculture, we talk about cover crops, and we talk about soil or arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi and all these wonderful components of healing a farm. I have been blessed to be on most of the top-end regenerative farms in America. I'm friends with a lot of the leaders of this movement. I've been on farms of all shapes and scales, and I can tell you that including my own farm, I have never been on a regenerative farm. Because no one is healing the farmers while they're healing the farms. And this has to go together, something I've learned the hard way. You can't hardly even say this. Farmers are 5 times more likely to commit suicide than the average American. And the average American is suicidal. We're a highly depressed country. And farmers are even worse. How is this? How have we allowed this to happen? And it's not just the U.S. In Australia, 45% of the farmers have contemplated suicide. So I'm going to run through some of the symptoms. And I guess I should preface this right now. Again, as you heard, I am a farmer. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychiatrist. I have gotten pushback for doing what I'm doing because I'm not qualified to talk to you about mental health. So we'll just put that disclaimer right up front. And what you're about to hear are my observations of what I've seen and my own personal journey. Some of the symptoms, if you think you are depressed or one of your loved ones or farm employees is depressed, these are some of the symptoms that you could be seeing are mood swings, irregular appetite, poor sleep, loss of energy, tired, alcohol. Alcohol increases, and I could sadly do a whole presentation on alcohol use in rural America. The numbers are staggering, stunning, and sickening. The alcohol that is involved in farming today. Loss of concentration and decision making, change in personality, negative thoughts, loss of self-worth. If you have 1 or 2 or 3 of these, how easy is it to run a business? How easy is it to run a farm? I can tell you, I went through a divorce in the early 2000s, and we all suffer depression. You lose a loved one. You go through different experiences in life. There's different forms of depression. We're all going to be depressed at some point in time. So, after going through my divorce, when I went through my financial meltdown, I was kind of prepared because I kind of knew mentally what was coming and what to be prepared for. And when you look at the decision making, I called in my team when I went through my financial meltdown because I knew the decision making was going to struggle. Because there was literally days I could not tell you what 7 plus 7 was. I would tell you it was 16. And I'd tell you that as confident as I knew that was right. It's just what happens inside of you when these things start to happen. And a lot of times you don't even know it. Loss of interest. Causes. Isolation. And that is obviously one of the biggest ones. And I don't have to tell anybody that's a farmer about isolation. I mean, I don't care what scale you're farming at, there's not enough people in our lives, and especially the large-scale grain farmers, livestock farmers. You spend all day in a 6x6 cab or on a horse in the middle of nowhere by yourself. It gets really easy to go down a dark hole, start thinking about the payment you can't make tomorrow and missing your kids' games and all those things. And then, COVID shows up and they tell us to isolate, and I'm like, what? Oh, life is normal. Okay, I'll just go on about my day. Nothing changed for farmers during COVID. Diet. And this is another hard part to talk about farmers who are supposed to be growing food and how lousy our diets are. Something that's got to change. One of my heroes, my mentor, Masanobu Fukuoka, if you've not read The One Straw Revolution, it should be on your bedside. Greatest book I've ever read. Food and medicine are not two different things. They are the front and back of one body. Chemically grown vegetables may be eaten for food, but they cannot be used for medicine. We can say the same with grain and meat and everything else. So when I was a kid, you can tell I'm old, I'm in my 60s now. We all had a medicine cabinet, right? Well, this is what it looked like. And we all had a pantry, and this is what it looked like. And I may be old, but I'm not that old. Because today, this is what the medicine cabinet looks like, and this is what the pantry looks like. And we really think there's not a connection? Seriously? I saw one research study by 2050, antibiotic-resistant infections could be killing 10 million people worldwide. I mean, there's so many slides I could put in here, so many numbers, so much research at different areas of things, but they're all tied to food. They're all tied to the immune system. They're all tied to the gut. And nutrition. We may be growing food, but is there any nutrition in it? Because there's a lot of research out there that shows that we're not growing nutrient-dense food today. And if, as a farmer, I talked about learning that soil was alive. If your soil isn't alive, you're not getting nutrition in the food because it takes the arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi to make the connection with the plant, to make the trade between the sugars of the plant and magnesium and whatever the plant needs. And when you're tilling and spraying constantly, there's no room for the AMFs to thrive and feed the plant. If they can't feed the plant can't feed us. It's that simple. Stress, obviously, is a big cause here, as we all know. We are all way overstressed. And stress comes in many different forms. Financial stress. I talked about not being on a regenerative farm. I have met a handful of farmers in my life at any scale that are profitable. I've had a lot of farmers tell me they're profitable until I ask if they're taking government subsidies. That shuts up 75% of them, and if they have off-farm income, and that shuts up the rest. Because we can't afford health insurance, and we can't afford to live without our welfare. That's just the sad fact of agriculture. So this graph comes from Canada. I'm willing to bet what's left of my bank account that the United States chart would look exactly the same way. The black line up here is all ag income. The blue shaded area is industry's share. The green shaded area is our share. Do we see a problem here? And this has happened in a really short time. The combine on the left helped pay for the farm, and the one on the right is going to cost us the farm. It's happened really fast. And a lot of this has happened because of concentration in agriculture. Nowhere else in America would they allow the top four to control the market. And we do it in every sector of agriculture. And this chart is 12 years old or 13 years old. It's not gotten better. You'll see some other names up here that you might recognize that you don't think about when you think about industry and controlling the market. We pay money to lobby groups to lobby for us. I will stand here and tell you they do not lobby for me. They lobby for industry. Why do we continue to pay them to lobby for the people that are taking the money out of our pockets, making us sick, making us depressed? We need to all stand up together, argue for ourselves. It's become all about greed. Going back to the previous presentation, and you're going to hear this over and over in mine, I'm not learning anything today. Everything that I've done on my farm, physically as a farmer, or mentally in my health or my spiritual journey, isn't learning. I'm just remembering. It's all we're doing. It's the way our ancestors did it, the way the indigenous did it, this spiritual connection with the land, with ourselves. Today, farming is about one thing and one thing only, profit. Because they've got us into a position where that's all we can think about. We're just trying to survive today so that we can still be here tomorrow and not have to go get that town job. And when your focus is on profit, environmental stewardship, social justice, all those other things go out the window. We have, and I'm not saying we need profit, obviously, unfortunately, as long as we have banks. But we've got to bring these other two into play also. We can't just focus on profit. And obviously the other major stress is time. Time is money. Time is family. And we as humans aren't very good at taking help when we're offered it, right? So I mentioned my going broke. In 2012, crop insurance denied my claim in the hottest, driest year ever. I was already struggling financially, and they basically drove me to the brink of bankruptcy. I did not declare bankruptcy, unfortunately, because I had too much stupid pride, which we'll talk about later too. I spent 20 months battling RMA and the government. I won, if there's such thing as a victory. But it cost me 20 months of my life. I went broke in the process. So who won? And once you lose crop insurance as a large-scale farmer, your operating line of credit is immediately ceased. So I'm farming 2,000 acres with no operating line for 2 years, 2 growing seasons. Try to do that. I had friends and neighbors bring me a pallet of seed or a pallet of fertilizer or a pallet of chemicals, offer help. I was still doing some spraying and things at the time. You know, people showed up and helped. And as Cover Crop Seed Company sent me a whole bunch of seed and said, plant it and send us what you harvest. I mean, my community rallied. But when you're that broke that in order to buy a tank of fuel, I had to sell a cow. That was my operating line of credit. The sale's on Wednesday. So I have a flat tire on Friday. I can't put a new tire on the tractor until the next Thursday. Try to farm like that for 2 years. Timing is everything. When you miss a rain, you plant too late. So on Father's Day of 2014, I didn't attend the family gathering because it was June and I was still planting. I was still planting my first crop, not my end of planting. I was just starting. And so I skipped Father's Day that day. The winter before, a seed customer of mine, he come to me and says, I want to show you this. And he takes me into his barn and shows me this tractor. It had belonged to my grandfather. It was the first new tractor he'd ever bought. And a few weeks later, he dies. And my dad was fortunate enough to go to the sale and bring the tractor back home. My brother, my son, and my 2 nephews spent the winter fixing the tractor up, and they re-gifted it to my dad that Father's Day. And I wasn't there. My kids were livid. There was family pictures taken. I'm not in any of them. It's my dad in the middle, my brother on the right. 8 weeks later, he was dead. He died in a farming accident. And I'm not in the last pictures because I was trying to survive as a farmer. And I made a choice that day, and I had a priority. And my priority that day was money. I picked that over my family. That's what this model of farming, that's what this system does to us. Because I had every right, because if I didn't plant that day, there was chances I was going to lose the farm. These are the decisions we have to make every day as farmers. What kind of life is this? Obviously, regulations are a problem. It was a great day when I got out of large-scale farming. I've not been in the FSA office. I've not had crop insurance for 10 plus years. I do not miss it. I will not go back. By the time this all happened, we were moving the farm to organic. We were, into regenerative ag and all these things. And I started attending organic conferences. And I found out it was nothing, it was the same. Yeah, they don't use chemicals, but they got hoops and regulations and all this stuff, and the government's still in charge. We went a different direction. I don't want to be involved in any of this anymore. I want to be in charge. Freedom to farm, show me the freedom to farm. Crop insurance tells us to plant corn, soybeans, wheat, and cotton. They incentivize 4 crops, period. That's it. Show me the freedom. There isn't any. I've already talked about crop insurance. It's our new welfare system. It's supposed to be insurance, people. It's supposed to rebuild the house when it burns down. When I burn up in 2012, that's what crop insurance is for, is to keep me alive. It's not to tell me what to do, which is what they use it for today. So I went small. And yeah, I've got out from underneath some of those regulations, but at the end of the day, they're still there. Go talk to my little processor that processes our beef and lamb and pork. They are treated the same way Tyson is treated. And me, direct marketing grass-finished beef, I have to play by the same rules that the grain-fed people do. I can't sell T-bones to my customers. You want to know why? Because my beef is too close to 30 months of age, which makes them a risk. Yeah, they're a risk, all right. A risk to the system is all they are a risk to. And obviously weather. And I'm not going to sit here and turn this into an argument over climate change. If those of you that don't think something is changing, that's fine. But we all notice that the weather is getting weirder. And if you don't believe me, go to North Carolina and ask them. It's getting crazier and crazier, and that just adds to the stress of farming. How easy is your day? I mean, it's just a matter of time before Helene hits Kansas. It'll just have a different name, right? It's coming. And then the stress that adds to that. The wildfires we're now seeing in Kansas and Oklahoma that are brought on in part by poor grazing management, brought in part by lousy incentives from policy. And I know farmers that have been in this, and the next morning you see the pictures of the fire on the news, and it's devastating in a burned down house. How would you like to take a rifle out the next morning to go look for your cows? It's your family. And then have to shoot them because they've been laying there for 12 or 24 hours suffering. These are the stories that don't get told about what's going on with our weather. And boy, here's the elephant in the room that needs addressed. Succession. I hear it over and over. And when I left for the farm, which I'll get into a little bit later, I found out I could be easily 70 years old before I know what my family's plan is. And I've talked to so many farmers my age, 50, 60 years old, and you want them to change their practices and you want them to change the way they're farming, but the farm isn't theirs. So how can you change when you don't know that you're going to get it in 10 or 20 or 30 years? Expectations kind of goes with succession, right? I see so many people, so many farmers today, and they're not willing to talk about their financial woes on the farm and think about their mindset. How did they get to be a farmer in 2024? Dad survived the 80s, Grandpa survived the Depression. I can't lose it now, it's not that bad. You know, the expectations that are handed down through generational trauma. Well, Dad always did it this way. Grandpa always did it this way. These are things that we've got to break going forward. Because the high expectations are killing us, literally and figuratively. And then this will rub some feathers wrong also, that the chemicals are playing a huge part of this. A huge part. And just from the depression side, there's plenty of research out there today showing a direct relationship with the chemicals we're using in agriculture and depression. One study showed organochlorine insecticides and fumigants increased depression by 90 and 80% in the farmers that they studied. That's a big number. And you add all this together, and I think you kind of see where we are and how we got here. Jerry Bernetti was another guy that in 2012, along with Lynette, probably saved my life and helped me get out. Jerry said, we have a crisis in the USA. It's a health crisis. A health crisis is an ag crisis. We can't fix one without fixing the other. It's all as one piece. And all farmers seem to want to talk about today, whether they're organic or regenerative or conventional, is yield. I grew 300 bushel corn last year. Whoop-dee-doo. This lady grew 7,000 acres or 7,000 pounds on a tenth of an acre. Tell me about your 300 bushel corn. It's not about yield. It's just a lie we've been told. It's not about yield. Grain farming today, the way we're doing it, doesn't feed people. It feeds the system. Americans have the lowest health rating in the developed world thanks to this industrial processed diet and the fact that we have the most expensive healthcare system in the world, even though it ranks 37th in terms of quality. This slide is several years old. I saw one the other day. The United States is 60th in life expectancy. 60th. We're the smartest, richest people on the planet, but our life expectancy ranks 60th. And Western medicine doesn't help either. It doesn't cure people. It feeds the system. I was at a couple of conferences, one in Colorado, one in Oklahoma this fall, and they were more medical conferences. And there are doctors and nurses out there just like farmers that have jumped out of conventional ag into organic and regenerative, and there's doctors the same way that are realizing the system that they were brought up in isn't curing anybody, it's killing them. And I spoke at both of these conferences, and it was incredible to hear them telling the exact same story that I've been telling for 20 years, just using different words and different phrases. They have the same issues, the same regulations, the same problems that they're dealing with, being silenced by their superiors, all of these things. And they are dying to know their farmers. And we need them also. And the last conference was in Tulsa, and there's a lady there named Erin Martin. Some of you have probably heard of her. Erin is doing fantastic work in Tulsa with a program called Fresh RX. And she is backing it up with science, and the numbers that she is showing of recovering from diabetes and doing it in 12 to 24 months. It is absolutely phenomenal, and I promise you all of the experts would tell you that she is lying. But she has the people and the data to back it up. We can do this. We can do it really quickly. And we all love to argue about the budget, right, and the military. How many people think that military spending is too high? And I'm with you. Try that on for size. I don't hear anybody complaining about that, except they want to argue about health insurance, but we can't afford health insurance when we're going this way this fast. We have to cure this. We have to stop this. The United States spends half per capita on food that Europe does, but 3 to 4 times per capita on health care. See a similarity? In 1950, we used to spend 30% of our budget on food. Today it's 13, or 2003. I'm sure it's much less now. In 1800, half of us were farmers. In 1945, half of us were growing food. Today, 1/10 of 1% of us are growing food. So, one thing that I saw when I left conventional agriculture and I started attending organic conferences, and I started talking to organic farmers, and I made a realization that even though, yes, organic has eliminated chemicals, these farmers still woke up every morning with the same mindset that I woke up with every morning in conventional ag. What am I going to have to kill today? What's attacking my farm today? And how am I going to deal with it? And when you think about the spirituality of being a farmer, I mean, I talk about remembering. You know, what did our forefathers do? What did the indigenous do? They didn't worry about what was attacking, right? They grew their food with love. They grew their food in a system that was so robust that it was never under attack. And as farmers, how healthy is our food if we're growing it from the mindset that we have to kill things every day? And so I didn't dwell there very long. And Lynette and I talked about it, and we said, and it was Lynette, you know, it's about life. And so we started trying to change and grow a new farm and a new system. And we want to grow our food in a system that's designed around life, not death. We think it grows healthier food. And part of that, and it's been so fun to walk out every morning and see what's growing and hatching and living on the farm. And it's also sad because 20 years ago I was trying to kill 90% of it, 95% of it, because I had to grow corn. And, you know, I don't think I don't. We have invasive species on our farm. We have 6 different species of thistles. Yes, we have cedar. We have Sericea lespedeza. They're all home to something. Something eats all of them. Something lays eggs in all of them. How do we know that's not the cure to cancer we're killing? How do we know it's not the insect that's eating the corn earworm? Yet, as farmers, all we want to do is kill it all. We continue to incentivize with taxpayer dollars the degradation of our landscapes, our climate, and our health. The crop insurance system is not funded by the government, it's funded by you. We're funding this with taxpayer dollars. So I'm going to steal the thunder from one of our future speakers today. I got part of the way through his book. It's a wonderful story. Look forward to hearing him later. And I love this quote. How can we take responsibility for the future we are now making? You can't see this, but this is a church picnic or a school picnic or something, and I promise you there's no food on the table. There's a squeeze box of high fructose corn syrup and some Twinkies and some other stuff, but there's no food. And we live in a world of convenience. We farm in a world of convenience. That all has to change. One of my mentors is a guy named Peter Donovan. He's co-founder of the Soul Carbon Coalition, and he was visiting me 10 years ago. I was probably 5 or 6 years removed from GMOs. And Peter's a guy that he's never answered a question in his life. All he does is ask more questions, which pisses me off to no end. And he goes, Gail, I got a question for you. And I'm like, great, here we go. How much money did you make off of GMOs? I'd never really thought about it until that moment. Because I was there, I'm old enough, I was there when they started. I talk to 30-year-olds and 40-year-olds today, they don't know the difference. But I was there when they started. I saw the yield drag. I saw myself being used as the lab rat. I saw myself paying $17 a bag more for the Roundup Ready soybeans for the technology fee, for research, to fund Monsanto, not fund me. I never made a nickel. Roundup Ready soybeans was about convenience. It made our lives easier for the first time. But for those of you that don't spray, it was a nightmare. Because we got to the point in the 80s and the 90s that trying to control weeds, there was so many. And so you took a pint of this and a pinch of that. It was a little grandma's stew with chemicals. And you threw it out there and you prayed that it killed something. And Roundup come along and killed everything, and our soybean field looked like a golf course. It was all about easy. It was all about convenience. And all I hear today is about becoming efficient, becoming, more efficiencies, convenience. We need to go the other way. We got to get away from convenience. We got to get away from efficiencies. I start all of my farm tours with the phrase, soil is the answer, what is the question? And I'll ask you, what keeps you up at night? What would you like to see solved in the world? Because I can fix it with healthy soil. No one's got me yet. There's no hands in the air. Nobody's even going to try me today. Nobody? Well, I've been asked lots of questions, obviously. Everybody's got a problem. Everybody's got something that keeps them awake at night, right? But this started 10 years ago. And year by year, the questions have become more focused and a little angry. And today, I really only get 1 or 2 questions. And the number one question is gun violence and school shootings, racism, the top 2 questions. You can't fix those with soil health. Bullshit. Because if we were treating our soil the way the indigenous treated it before we took it from them, if we were truly growing our food with love, how could we ever hate our neighbor? And we were truly healthy. I can end it all. I can fix it all with healthy soil. It's very easy. The fix is very, very easy. How are we doing on time, Nick?
10:37. Go for another probably 10 minutes.
Okay. So I'm going to share a little bit of my personal journey for what it's worth. So a few years ago at a farming conference where they wanted me to talk about agronomy and real farming, and I was making all these changes on my farm with cover crops and life and all this stuff, and I got to thinking. So I was born in 1962, and so I put together a set of slides that showed the farm every 10 years of my life. So obviously it started in 1972 when I was 10 years old. I wasn't the farmer yet. This is what Dad was growing on the farm. And it was a very typical Kansas farm in the 70s, right? There was lots of different crops. There was some livestock, a very, very diverse operation. And we were using basically no chemicals. We were using a little bit of fertilizer. We weren't organic, but we were dang close in 1972. And by the time I'd taken it over, with a lot of help from the government and policy and programs, this is what the farm had become. Go big or go home. Farm fence row to fence row. You know, from the Johnson administration through Nixon, all the way up through the Bushes and all of them. That's all we've been told. We have to feed the world, which is a lie. We've been growing enough food for 10 billion people for 15 years. And there's still people starving to death every night, even in Kansas. So this was a really interesting set of slides, and I'm kind of skipping through it here, but to show you the beginning and the end. But the thing with the farm was, every 10 years, things were disappearing on the farm side. We were taking out crops, simplifying the farm, you know, becoming specialist. And the more we took out on the crop side, on the livestock side, the more that went up. Till I hit bottom in 2002, and industry was making a killing off of me while I was killing myself. And this is what happened when I simplified my farm. And this is what happens when you take nature out of the farm. So, and then the fun part is, after I fell off the wagon and hit my head, and we brought the diversity back, all the inputs disappeared, or started disappearing. So I redid these slides when I started talking about mental health. I said, hey, let's look at my journey. So now we're going to look at my journey as a 10-year-old kid in 1972, living on a farm. Obviously, you know, we had, my grandparents lived on the farm. There was multiple gardens. We still had chickens that we were harvesting for meat and eggs. You know, it was a very diverse farm, and we were growing a lot of our own food. And what we were purchasing at the store, I firmly believe that Velveeta had cheese in it when I was a kid. There's no cheese in it today. So it may not have been perfect, but it's certainly better than what we're eating today. You know, I eat very little sugar. My brother and I were given a Pepsi once every maybe a month, and we split it. And that was the best night ever, because there was usually popcorn involved also, right? And most of our meals were at home. And as a farmer, it's really sad, because in the 70s through the early 80s, and we were already in the go big or go home, right? We were already in, the farm was getting big. We had a lot of employees at noon every day during silage harvest, hay season, milo harvest, it didn't matter. Every day at noon, everything got shut off, and we drove to the house, and Mom had lunch for us. It didn't matter how big the crew was. When you look at that slide from 2002, lunch, if I had it, was a bag of McDonald's. It was thrown in the door of the cab while I didn't slow down. You know, that's what we turned food into in a short time. Obviously, I really didn't have any stress. I was a busy kid in nature. By 1982, I'm a year out of high school. I'm a year away from being married, and it's the 80s, right? And I'm trying to start farming in the 80s. Wasn't a very smart idea on my part, probably. You know, my wife, like all other wives on farms, had to get a job. So there wasn't really time for a garden anymore. We were growing less and less food. Sugar intake's going up. For me, I was never a breakfast person, so once I got out of the house, I didn't have to eat bacon and eggs. I started eating leftover pizza and Pepsi. That was my favorite. Stress is climbing. I'm now going to a chiropractor. I've got physical wounds. Things are starting to accumulate in me. But I'm 20 years old too, and I'm 10 feet tall and bulletproof, right? And obviously the financial stress of the 80s. By 1992, we still have the small garden, but we're getting very little out of it because neither of us have time. We now have kids and all these other things. So dinner too many nights, my wife brought home pizza so I could have breakfast the next morning, right? And more Pepsi, and more Pepsi, and more Pepsi. Stress is climbing. Yeah, the 80s are over, but that financial stress lingered And probably still shows up today on most farms. So the stress is just continuing to climb. By 2002, remember what the farm looked like in 2002? Now this is what I looked like in 2002. We're now purchasing most of our protein, purchasing most of our food. My diet consists of Mylanta, Tylenol, Advil, Aleve, Pepsi. I'm now up to a case a day during harvest and planting season. It wasn't uncommon. I lived on Pepsi just like people lived on cigarettes. Stress, Roundup ready crops, my marriage is collapsing, and I'm in chronic pain. Every morning with the Pepsi, it was Tylenol, and then 2 hours later it was 4 Aleve, and then 2 hours after that it was 4 Advil. I started over. My legs hurt, my hips hurt, my shoulders hurt. It was just another day. And you don't exercise, you sit in the cab all day. That's farming today. So I got divorced in 2004. Lynette came into my life a year or so later, and the farm was already making these changes. And so by 2012, when I lost my crop insurance and the financial thing really unwound, we had already started our personal health journey. You know, I realized I was pre-diabetic. I was on a high cholesterol. Well, I was being forced into high cholesterol medication, high blood pressure. My last doctor visit, I caved in and got the prescriptions for the high cholesterol and the high blood pressure. I went home, I took them for about a week. And I looked in the mirror one morning and I said, Grandma's 90, my other grandma's 80, my parents are healthy, none of them are on meds. Why am I taking these? What did I do wrong? What's happened to me? And it dawned on me it was me. This wasn't genetics. This was my environment. This was my world. This was my farm. This was my story. And this is who I'd become as a farmer. And I threw them in the trash. And Lynette and I had a heart-to-heart. And we went a different direction. And by 2012, I'm down to 1 or 2 Pepsis a day. And we're overhauling the diet. But the stress is still sky high. I'm broke now. In hindsight, the depression, the long-term, the bad depression really set in with the crop insurance debacle late 2012, 13, and 14. I didn't admit it to myself at least until probably 2016 or 17 at the earliest. We'll probably getting ahead of myself a little bit, but I don't want to forget this either because it's really important. And especially when you think of the farmers in my old world, old white guys, right? And we have been told for multiple generations to don't cry, suck it up, be a big boy, you're a man, be a man. And how many generations of that am I carrying with me? From my dad, my grandpas, my great-grandpas. It all just keeps getting handed down. And so the pride is a good thing to a point until it kills you. And us, all of us, but especially us old white guys, need to let go of a lot of that. Because I cry. You've seen me already tear up a couple of times. And I've said in crowds, he's crying. Where's the exit? I'm uncomfortable. You think I'm weak to stand up here and cry in front of a crowd? Come up and try it. Come up and try to cry in front of somebody. It's the most difficult thing to do. And I tell you, it feels wonderful when it's over. There's nothing wrong with crying. It's something we need to do. So the depression was setting in, isolation, obviously. I talked about the decision making that goes with that. It was becoming difficult. Confidence. You just lose it. I mean, everything goes, all you think about is, well, what's going to go wrong today? What tire is going to blow today? What's going to cause problems today? And then I talked about in 2012, the government shows up and tell me they don't like my farm promoting life. And we went through that 20-month battle. So the next few years were, personally, my blood pressure went down, my cholesterol went down, all these things physically were clicking. Our diet worked. I lost weight. I'm almost to my high school weight. So our approach physically was working fantastic. But I'm bleeding financially. I'm hemorrhaging. Unfortunately, when I got divorced, my parents co-signed my note. So bankruptcy, things like that, I have to think about those things because it's not just me now. My parents are involved. I could take them down with me. And even though I'd survived the insurance, when you go 2 years without income, it gets pretty bad. And we're now down to 400 acres. We wanted to downsize. That happened. It wasn't hard. It wasn't exactly the way you'd want it to, but it happened. And so we're down to 400 acres, and on 400 acres, it's pretty hard to service the debt from what I did in the previous 10 years. I don't care how much you're selling your grass-finished beef for retail. You're not going to fill that hole in with 400 acres. So things were getting very difficult mentally, spiritually. And we had to make a really hard decision. We had left Farm Credit during the whole meltdown. Well, we were invited to leave. Thank God. We found a mom and pop bank, and they were still behind me, as bad as I was bleeding. And even in 2019, they said, Gail, just bring us a plan, and we'll approve it. We'll help. But I knew there was nothing left to do. And so it took me from 2018, it took me about a year and a half, because unfortunately, Lynette is my biggest cheerleader. I had to convince her, I had to convince my parents, all these people that believed in me, that I was going to fail. And I had a hard talk with the bank, and I just told them. And they said, yeah, we can't continue, but if you can find a plan, we will back you. But otherwise, yes, we're going to have to call the note at some point. So I took my parents in and had my bankers tell them that message. It was a fun day. And so in late 2018, at the age of 56, I decided to walk away from 56 years of blood, sweat, and tears, of hopes and dreams, and we decided to sell our farm. Start over. Why not? You know what every 60-year-old farmer does? Let's move the farm. There's a fun idea. And we went through the winter, and I'm kind of getting ahead of the spiritual part here, but this is really important when you start thinking about connection with the land and connection with all these things. I started getting into interconnectedness. And I'll tell you, it scares the crap out of you. There's no such thing as deja vu, folks. All this thing happens, everything happens for a reason. And in the spring of 2019, we had talked to a realtor. We had an appraisal on the property. The bank, the parents, we were all lined up and ready. But our field school, Lynette and I have a field school every year. It's a large educational event we host, and it was coming up in March. And I said, we need to just put the sale on hold for a couple of weeks and get through this because this takes a lot of work. There's 100 people coming. We had Dr. Fred Provenza, who's written a book on nourishment. Dr. Zach Bush were the two speakers. It's a big deal. I finally admitted in the last year that's not why I put the farm on the sale on hold. It's because I still had hope. And I thought in those 2 weeks I would go to the mailbox, I would find that check for $1 million and bail me out, and I could continue to stay there. That was the real reason I put it on hold. And so we get to the field school, and Zach Bush, does everybody here know who Zach Bush is or have heard of him? He's a fantastic medical doctor that has left Western medicine. He's a cancer researcher, and his story is very similar to mine, just in a whole different world. And Zach gets up on stage, and his opening statement, all cancer is caused by stress. He goes, I'll rephrase that. All disease is caused by stress. That kind of hit home. His closing statement that afternoon was, and I'll paraphrase, but whatever is causing you stress in your life, you need to let it go. That night I'm laying in bed, it's midnight, my brain's going on, there's no way I'm sleeping. Lynette, she hits the pillow, she's out. She's always out. So I'm laying there 3 hours later, my brain's still going, and in the dark I hear a voice. Did you hear him? I said, yeah, I heard him. And the next day we put our farm on the market. We met with Zach. Mm-hmm. So we had a rendezvous with Zach a year ago, and he didn't know any of this story. He didn't know coming into our field school where we were. I mean, he didn't even hardly know us. He knew nothing of our story. He knew nothing of our background. Yet I'm fully convinced that Zach's only mission there that day wasn't to talk to farmers about health and glyphosate and all those things. He flew hundreds of miles to spend one day on our farm to give me that nudge I needed. I mean, we're all in this for a reason, and people show up in my lives for a reason that sometimes I don't know for 2 or 3 years what that reason is, but we're all here together on this journey. Okay. Yep, I think might have a couple slides to a good breaking point here. Let me see.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and kind of show what's happened and where we've gone then from 2019 to today, and can't wait to share the rest of my story. So we'll pick up where we left off. If you can't read this, when was the most difficult time in farming for you? Well, the first 49 years. Just some of my observations here of what came out of what happened in the previous 10, 20, 40 years. The Green Revolution is dead. We need to teach the world to feed itself. We need to feed our own. 1 in 4 kids in Kansas is food insecure, and we call ourselves the breadbasket of the world. We need to empower farmers. A really hard lesson I learned during the fall that was some of the best part of us downsizing, starting to direct market grass-finished beef, having a farm that's full of life and fun, and I enjoyed getting out of bed and going to work in the morning. But guess what I realized when I went to sell that grass-finished beef? I didn't know how. All I knew how to do was to go to the elevator, bend over the chair, and take whatever they were giving me, or the sale barn. You think there's a coincidence there? They don't want us empowered. They don't want us knowing how to tell our story. They don't want us to know how to market our product. That makes us dangerous. The first time I sold, my first customer was in Lawrence, Kansas. I couldn't look them in the eye. I was so confident in my product. For the first time in my life, I had a product that I was proud of, that I believed in, and yet I couldn't look them in the eye when I gave them the price. And they said, oh, who do I make the check out to? Didn't faze them at all. But all I knew is the commodity wholesale world. So we've got to learn, we've got to empower farmers to learn how to tell their story, to learn how to market their farm and themselves. And that's the thing that I've learned as a direct marketer, as a retailer now, as even during our transition, we were still using some chemicals and we still were far from being a perfect farm and that whatever that looks like. Our customers didn't care. They wanted to see our face. They wanted to hear Lynette's story and my story, and all they wanted to know was that we actually cared about the land on which we lived. That's all they cared about. They wanted to know that there were, because all they knew about farmers was they hate the environment. And they just wanted to meet a farmer and find out that they were human and they actually cared. That was most important. They just wanted our story. So we need to empower farmers. We got to relax the rules and regulations. We got to let them be farmers. They know what to do. And we need diversity. We need diversity on the farms. We need more crops. We need more plants, more diversity of plants, more diversity of livestock, more diversity of insects, and more diversity of people. We need a lot more diversity. And we need more diversity in not just farmers. We need the cobblers. We need the bakers. We've kicked all of them out. Anybody that has a skill has been kicked out. And we wonder why rural America is dead. And what we're seeing is the people are coming. But what most people that are left in rural America don't want is somebody that's not an old white guy or an old white family to move into rural America. And that's sad and it's sick and it has to change. There's nothing wrong with having a neighbor that doesn't look like you, think like you, vote like you, and pray like you. It takes diversity to make the world go round. And we need it all. So we moved the farm. And if that wasn't enough fun, we actually moved it twice in 1 year. We sold the farm the end of May. I rented 100 acres from my father because the lawyers had to get involved. And I had until the end of the year to get out. And so we moved the farm, the animals, what little equipment we had onto 100 acres at my dad's place in Emporia. Lynette still had her house in Opie, and I moved to Opie. And I commuted 30 minutes a day to farm until we bought the new farm, and then we moved it again in September. You think moving a farm is fun? Do it twice in 1 year. That was a fun year. So we get the farm moved. You know, the changes that I'd made, it wasn't just the government that it didn't set well with. It didn't set well with my family. I lost my brother, not to death. I lost him 10 years before that. We quit speaking. We had our first conversation 1 week to the day before he died in 10 years. Our first real conversation. But we both farmed off the same property of my parents. My parents didn't understand. They didn't buy in. They only thought I was broke because of the changes I'd made. It was a difficult situation to be in. And that was why Zach's words hit home that night. If something is causing you stress, you got to let it go. And I truly thought that even though there was family stress, at the end of the day, we all did try to get along and not kill each other or bankrupt each other. You know, there was still the blood running through all of us that we were all the same. I didn't realize until I got to the new farm how much stress I left that day. I didn't realize how bad it was until I got to the new place where I didn't see them every day, even though they're my family and I love them. I needed out of that. Sometimes you just got to get out. And you have to move and leave those even if how much you love them. And so we did all that. And things started getting better. I told you my physical side was already good. And the mental side just started taking off. And I'm thinking I am healed. And then, so the farm we moved to is 160 acres. There's 2 residences on it. The farm that I sold is now Roundup Ready corn and soybeans, and it has been plowed to crap. I'd taken the organic matter from 2% to 7% in about 12 years. And I now get to drive by that every time to go hug mom and dad, and I get to see it. And I did not want that to ever happen. So we brought a family with us to the new farm. They were going.
Your presentation makes it difficult for what goodies for me to bring up.
Maybe you need to bring the whole basket. So we brought a family with us that was going to be partners. We needed help to do the work. We wanted to sell veggies. We had things we wanted to add to the enterprises. And we had to take out a loan. We're back in debt. I won't even go into that, but that was probably the dumbest thing I've ever done in my life, was going in debt a second time. So we brought this family with us. Well, 6 months in, they got homesick and moved back to their farm and wanted to start on their own. And once again, the financial stress shows up, all those old things. I'm back alone again. Lynette's still working in town. Suddenly the farm, the 4 kids, they had 4 kids with them. So instead of hearing laughter every morning, I'm now hearing the sound of silence. And so all of those other things from my old world started to show back up. And I crashed. 2021 might have been the worst year of my life. Started thinking about suicide. Started looking at my life insurance. I guess probably the saving grace was my life insurance wouldn't cover the debt. So I couldn't even kill myself. Sad but true statement. So 2021 was rough, and I couldn't figure it out because we've changed our diet, and we've taken all the chemicals out of our farm and out of our food, and why am I thinking about suicide? How can that be? And at our field school in 2021, by no coincidence, we brought in 2 of the greatest people on the planet. Sarah Keogh, who is a nutritionist, and she calls herself an eco-nutritionist. She's the only one like her on the planet that I've met. She's not a dietitian. This lady knows nutrition. And we brought in Nicole Masters. Nicole had just written a book called For the Love of Soil. She's probably the greatest soil scientist on the planet. And she is where we got the Heal the Farm, Heal the Farmer. Because she's the one that challenged us. So I didn't read the book. Lynette did, thank God. I read the first chapter in the book, because chapter 1, she talks about her paraquat poisoning. When I quit Roundup cold turkey in 2012, I still needed chemicals, and I replaced Roundup with paraquat. Probably not the smartest thing I've ever done, because it's just as bad. And so I couldn't even get past the first chapter, because she talked about her paraquat poisoning and curing that and how ugly it was. And I had to put the book down because I wasn't in a mental place where I could read the book. Like I said, fortunately Lynette did, and in the final chapter, Nicole challenged all of us, how can we talk about healing farms and regenerative agriculture when we're not healing the farmer? And it clicked. I didn't have to read, all I needed was to hear Nicole and Lynette talking about it. And it all dawned on me. Life, diversity, all these things I was preaching about, but I wasn't doing it myself. I was bringing life to the farm, I was bringing diversity to the farm, but I wasn't incorporating it in my daily life. I wasn't at one with the farm. I told everybody how much I love my farm, but I never went out and sat with the farm. I wasn't one with the farm. And so this day, this field school saved my life. And it got me in a different direction. And it's one that we all need. And again, it's not about learning, it's about remembering. So let's heal. Because what I learned on that day is I cannot address my mental health for a couple of weeks and read spiritual books and pray and meditate and then put that in the closet and work on my gut and all of this for a couple of weeks and then go to church for a couple of weeks or do spiritual things for a couple of weeks. You have to do it as one. Just like healing the community, growing the community, rebuilding the community, the farm, the farmer, this all has to go hand in hand. We cannot do it separately. Or at least in my case, it will be a failure. It was a failure. Crazy things I've learned. Thoughts start in the gut. Our brain is just like a processor of a computer. Our brain does nothing. All of our thoughts start in the gut. And when you look at human health from the physical standpoint today, the gut health is what's breaking, it's our immune system. It's why COVID became a pandemic, because our immune systems can no longer handle simple viruses. We can't handle anything anymore because our diets are so lousy, our stress loads are so high, our guts are leaking from the chemicals we're putting in them. We're literally breaking down our immune system, and it breaks down our whole body, mentally, physically, and spiritually. So if thoughts start in the gut and your gut's sick, how's your mental health? It's not good. Digestion, which is extremely important, starts in the brain. When you go listen to Sarah Keogh, you get just blown away by all this stuff. And don't ask me to explain it, because I can't. It's way over my pay grade. Thoughts start in the gut, digestion starts in the brain. People are shocked when they find out that 90% of serotonin, the happy chemical, it is produced in the gut. They're also shocked when they find out that 70% of your immune system is in the gut. The food you consume impacts more than you know. Digestive health equals immune and mental health. It all goes together. Glyphosate not only breaks down the gut, we've also now found that it crosses the blood-brain barrier. And this throws everything out the window. When you want to go back to the gun violence and why kids are walking into schools, look at their diet. When they got glyphosate on their brain, there's no telling how they're going to act. We have to make some changes. Connection to the land is vital. I've been saying this over and over. We have to love the land. We have to treat it with the love and respect that it deserves, because it wants to treat us the same way. The land is sick, and it's sick because, and it's not sick from the chemicals, it's sick from what we think of it. It's sick from what we're doing to it. It wants to help. It wants to be a part of our lives. It wants to heal. Our cells absorb negative energy. Zach talked about this at the field school that year. He said, so we're all, right? We're all just connected to this now. It's just gotten worse and worse. And he goes, even if you're one of those happy-go-lucky people, but you want to check Facebook, or you want to see, you know, who won the election or something, and you start scrolling some headlines, oh, somebody bombed somebody, oh, that's a bad story, I don't want to read that. You scroll on, right? You read it. You read that one sentence of hate, and your cells absorbed it. You didn't need to read the story. This is how sensitive we are to hate, to messages of hate, and things like that. And where are we today as Americans? I mean, I'm right and you're wrong, or vice versa. There's no middle ground, there's no common ground. We're just two sides. Christians and non, Republicans and Democrats, black and white, it doesn't matter. We're just living a story of hate. And our cells are absorbing all of that, our land is absorbing all of that, and it all has to change. I already said this, all disease is caused by stress. I'm going to say it again. All disease is caused by stress. Not only do we need empathy for others, we need empathy for ourselves. And that's a tough one for an old white guy. We need to find our community. I was going to say 99%, but 100% of the people that come to our farm, whether it's the field school, Airbnb people, my customers, lost neighbor, I don't care who it is. If you get into a conversation with them, pretty soon it comes down to one thing. I'm lonely. I'm looking for community. I'm looking for somebody like me. You know, farmers like me, unfortunately, we can't go to the fence and talk to our neighbors. We may live next to each other, but those conversations are still too difficult. We need to find our community. We need to grow our community. We need help on the farm. You know, I love this whole thing of all these robots killing weeds because it's replacing chemicals. But I can't have a conversation with a robot. I don't want to have a conversation with a robot. We need people. We need people back on the land. In agritourism, our customers, they want to know what we're doing. They want to come see the farm. Our Airbnb, half of our customers are families from Wichita and Kansas City with kids. These kids are 6, 8, 10, 12 years old, have never seen a pig, have never seen a cow. And that part I expected. I knew that was coming. The family from Olathe that showed up a couple years ago got me, and an 8 and a 13-year-old. They came in late March, and you know what Kansas is like in late March. It ended up being cold and dreary and kind of rainy. They had a great time. They still waited out in the mud and petted the pigs and did all those things. And I talked to them on the way out, and I said, well, I hope you enjoyed your stays. Yes, it was so wonderful with the animals. We just hoped we could see the stars. They came to spend 2 days at the farm because their 13-year-old daughter had never seen the stars outside of their backyard and what she could see in that area. The things that we as farmers take for granted. That's all they wanted, to show their kids the stars. They want to come, people. They want to see us. They want to know how they live. And some of them want to move in next door. They're tired of the cities. They're tired of the government for the same reason I'm tired of the government. They want to do something different, and they're coming. Let's welcome them. We need them. Peer groups. We started a peer group. There was, and it was a different peer group. I see pictures of peer groups online. I have people talk to me about peer groups, and I look at it, and it's 6 old white guys sitting around a table. Well, we weren't much better. There was 4 old white guys and 4 old white ladies. But our peer group, we were adamant that it was going to be the team. What good is a peer group if half of the decision makers aren't sitting at the table? And we got together once a month, and we cooked. And we shared a meal, and we talked about ideas, and sometimes we just laughed, and sometimes we talked about a problem with the farm or in our lives. Find them, people. Welcome them to the table. Start your group. Show up. I'm a hermit. The downside of the Depression, I got to where I loved it when people came to our field school. I loved when people come to the Airbnb. I loved it even more when they went home. I kind of lost that social aspect with my depression. And so, again, if it wasn't for Lynette, I would just sit in my house 365 days a year. But she makes me go places. She makes me come and speak. She makes me show up. And it's amazing what happens when you say yes. You get to hug people, you get to influence other people, they influence you. It's so many wonderful things. We've had people show up. I mentioned Jerry Bernetti earlier. We have what's called Harvest Hosts on our farm. Jerry died. There's a whole, I could go whole in depth on the interconnectedness of Jerry, but his death set this movement back 20 years. Nobody's been able to replace him. He wrote one book. He died several years ago. And we have Harvest Hosts, which is like Airbnb for RVs. People can bring their camper, spend the night on the farm, and instead of staying in a Walmart parking lot, they buy some grass-finished beef or a bottle of wine from a vineyard. It's a really cool thing. I forgot to block it off one night. We had an event the next day. I always block stuff for events so that I can take care of the event. And of course, somebody booked that night, right? And so I got to deal with these 2 campers, and these 2 ladies, and I did my duty, and I said hi, and I went about taking care of everything else. And the next morning before they left, they come in to purchase. I was out doing chores. They talked to Lynette, and Lynette come and got me. She goes, you got to meet these 2 people. One of the ladies was the lady that transcribed the book for Jerry Bernetti. She didn't know me. She didn't know anything about me. But I didn't say no. And I got one last connection with Jerry. Just say yes. Just say yes. So my diet. So I told you I got out of Pepsi. I now drink 1 Pepsi a year. It's kind of like an alcoholic, I think. And I open it up. One drink's all I need, and I dump it out on the ground and remind myself of why I don't drink that crap anymore. And it's not the same Pepsi that I was drinking when I was a kid anyway. There's nothing in it that is Pepsi anymore. So I got rid of that. And so the diet part, and for those of you that are still back where I was 20 years ago, don't get overwhelmed with this. I mean, you can go listen to Sarah Keogh, and her and I put on workshops across Kansas last year, and we stress to people, don't eat the elephant. Take notes, take one thing out of this meeting. I took Pepsi out of my diet. I didn't empty the cupboard and start all over with organic vegetables and all of that stuff. It probably would have killed me too. This is a process, people. It's a journey. Take the low-hanging fruit. Just make a start. So then make that change, and once your body adjusts to it, then say, okay, what's the next low-hanging fruit? So I went months and got the pop out of my diet, and we replaced it with juice and with healthier options and things like that. So when I took out something bad, I put in something good. And then we took out the carbs. And like I said, every time we took out something bad, we found something that was better, maybe not perfect, but it was steps. Just keep improving your diet. And it was amazing. Pretty soon, I realized I was getting up in the morning, and not only was I not having my pizza and Pepsi, because Lynette now makes me eat bacon and eggs, but I wasn't taking Tylenol. There's no pain in my legs anymore. But we're in this convenience-based world, so we want to go to the doctor and take a pill, because the pill works in an hour. Who cares if the side effects is hemorrhaging and bleeding anus? Let's just take the pill. It doesn't work that way. If you really want to heal, you have to put up with a slow process, and there's going to be setbacks, there's going to be pain, and there's going to be suffering. And you keep your focus on the beauty that's coming. And you just keep taking steps. But also, you've got to have a partner. You've got to have that team. You've got to have that peer group. You've got to have those cheerleaders helping you get there. You've got to find them and do this together. And the alcohol. And I still have a drink. I still love my bourbon. I had one last night. That was my one for the week. And I found I just don't need it anymore. And really, when I drink it, I really don't feel that good. It's just a matter of time before I quit it altogether. It just doesn't do anything for me anymore. Alcohol is just a painkiller. And I learned something in my spiritual journey, and I'll share this with you. So on the flip side, we started growing a lot of our own medicine. I make tinctures now, and it's really cool, doing all this fun stuff. And we got this other lady that's in one of our groups, and she's doing a lot of this similar things. And so we were having a conversation one day. She asked me about a tincture she wanted to make. And I said, I don't think the indigenous people went to the liquor store and bought vodka or grain alcohol to make their tinctures and their medicines. We're doing something wrong here. Did they use honey? How did they do this? Well, lo and behold, she finds a book by accident the next day about sacred herbalism, and she bought it, and there was a whole chapter in there on alcohol. And it was really interesting, and it was really scary. Alcohol, beer, is an upper. How many people knew that? We think of beer as a depressant because that's what it has become. Beer was an upper in the day. And 1,000 years ago, the church decided they did not want people reliant on beer as their upper. They wanted God as the upper. And this was a 400-year battle over alcohol and religion. And in the end, they decided to add hops to beer because hops is a depressant. And it would make people depressed, and they would quit drinking beer. How did that work for us? Exactly. And when I read that, I have not had a beer since. We know a vineyard operator that grows grapes regeneratively. We get some wine from him, but I'm as picky on my alcohol today as I am on anything else. And when you see, it's like everything in our life. Once you let man get a hold of it, all they do is just destroy it. We do it through money and religion, and everything in our lives today is just really messed up. We eat seasonal and local. People do not like going to a restaurant with me. We don't do it very often, and it's usually not fun because I have a lot of questions. And we ate at a cool restaurant last night, and we asked 3 questions, and the restaurant served local. They advertised local, and the waiter couldn't answer a single question we had. So how local was it? How good was it? But our forefathers and mothers, they didn't eat out of season. They didn't eat oranges in January. We shouldn't either. We need to be eating seasonally and locally. It's what's best for our gut. It's what's best for our immune system. You got to ask questions, and then sometimes you just have to say no. And then you have to listen to yourself to know when you should be saying yes and when you should be saying no. For the stress part, for the immunity part, for the mental, physical, spiritual part, we got to get in nature. We got to get back outside. And farmers, this is not nature. Sorry. I'm pretty sure Mother Nature would agree with me on this one. This is not nature. This is nature. We got to get lost in her again. I already talked about, the phones. There's research starting to come out. We're suffering from data overload. There just comes a point it's too much. We quit watching the news years ago. I follow it. We know who won the election. We keep up. We know. I wake up every morning and check just to make sure the U.S. is still here. But other than that, we don't watch the news. And we have friends, and it's crazy. Because they'll come to spend the night and they'll say, well, did you hear what Trump said? Did you hear what Biden did today? What do you think about that? I didn't hear. I don't care. Well, they said this. Don't you think that was wrong? I don't know. And they just get angrier and angrier. And I'm just sitting there with a dumb look on my face, smiling, like, you want to go for a walk? Let's chill out. And the nuts and bolts of it, yes, the financial stress, we cannot wish it away. The bank is still there. The payments are still there. And I wish for everyone in this room I could take that stress off of you, but I can't. I can't even take it off of myself. So it's one that unless you're the billionaire in the room, which I haven't met him yet, we have to worry about this every day. So if we can't get rid of it, it comes down to can we manage it? And that's what I've learned to do. When I'm done at work and it's time to go to the house, it's time to go to the house. And you got to leave that outside. And it's different for all of us, but you've just got to find a way that when you walk into that house with your spouse and your kids or whoever, that you leave all that outside. It'll be there tomorrow. Don't worry. I worried about that for a long time, but every morning I walked outside, there the damn thing was. Still there waiting, but pick it up then and carry it through the day. Don't take it with you. I already talked about where thoughts start in the brain. We got to keep our thoughts positive. Yeah, I'm broke. But you think positive things. It's amazing what our thought does to us. And I'll show some data in a little bit that backs this up. It's just amazing. Time. I talked about the day I prioritized my farm over my family and what that cost me. Do you have goals? Do you have priorities? Write them down. And the next time you come into that situation, that'll help you decide, oh, wait a minute, I can park the tractor for an hour, work later tonight, but go spend that hour, even if it's just an hour. Find a way. Make it happen. Allocate. Ask somebody to help. We're not very good at that as farmers. But, pride gets in the way. There's nothing wrong with asking for help. Downsize. Everybody's got a piece of land that isn't profitable, but they got to hang on to it. Someday I'm going to get rich off that ground I'm losing money on. Let somebody else turn it into their financial stress. Focus on what's important. And what's the true cost of your land, of the farm? Is it profitable without subsidies? Because if it isn't, it's not profitable. Maybe you need to find a different way of farming it. Maybe you need to find a different way of marketing. Maybe you need to make some changes. System needs an overhaul. Period. We're going to have to get creative. Until we get number one taken care of, we have to be creative in the way we do things. Case in point, one of my mentors is a small dairy farm in Kansas. And he made his transition because he was going to lose his farm in the 80s if he didn't go a different way. So he quit grain farming and started milking cows, and then started direct marketing raw milk. And he was so happy, he went to the farmer's market with his cooler of raw milk, and guess who knocked on his door the next day? The state. You can't sell raw milk at a farmer's market. Can't advertise raw milk. Can't do this, can't do that. He says, what can I do? They said, well, you can put a sign in your yard. He says, can I make the sign tall enough they can see it from Wichita? This is just the way this guy thought. So fast forward 10 years when the internet shows up and he builds a website. You can't advertise raw milk. He's selling pork and beef and dairy products and all these other things. So he's got a website with all of his products. At the top of the page, there's a picture of a jug of milk. And he quotes the Kansas statute. Kansas statute, blankety, blankety, blank, up yours, says, I cannot advertise the sale of raw milk. Doesn't say I'm selling raw milk. He doesn't have a price. All he has is the Kansas statute that says that he cannot advertise the sale of raw milk. Find a way. Find a way to make it work. With that, you need to find a mentor. Thank God I found him. And we have to quit farming to kill. Mother Nature bats last. Mother Nature has the last say, and Mother Nature always wins. COVID was a warning shot from Mother Nature. Helene was a warning shot from Mother Nature. She's getting tired of her stewards. She's getting tired of the managers, and she's looking for new ones. There's a reason we have Roundup-resistant pigweed in Kansas, and it's not because Mother Nature hates us. It's because she's not going to allow us to grow a monoculture crop in her prairie. She's not going to allow bare soil. That's not how a prairie looks. She is always going to win. Chemistry isn't the answer. We have to farm to grow. We have to have hard conversations with our parents, our grandparents, our kids. If we want our kids to return home, let's set it up so they can. How sad is it when farmers have a kid that's a 4.0, and what do they do with that kid? They don't want to set up a succession plan. Well, you're smart. Go to town, get a job. Be a doctor, be a lawyer, leave. We would never do that with our best bull, but we do it with our kids. We need them smart kids to help figure this out. But I get it. Why would you want to put your kid through what you've been through for the last 50 years? That's not a life. We can do better. What will you leave to the next generation? Right now we're leaving them a pile of debt, and one of these kids will have cancer and the other one will be diabetic. And that's the data. We can do better. And expectations. You are enough. Say it. I am enough. Say it louder. I didn't see every mouth moving. One more time. You are. No, you're not your dad. No, you're not your mom. Thank God. You are you. Be you. The chemical aspect. This is not how to grow food. I talked about one straw revolution, another quote from Massanubu. Ignorance, hatred, and greed are killing nature. And I've already heard it. It doesn't work here. No-till doesn't work here. Cover crops don't work here. Organic doesn't work there. But your soil is different. But it rains more. But. I don't want to hear it. It works everywhere. It works wherever you want it to work. It only won't work where you don't want it to work. I've had so many farmers say, well, cover crops don't work. And I said, of course they didn't. Because that's what you were saying when you were putting the seed in the drill. Hell no, it's not going to work. Not with that attitude. You're wishing it to fail. You're going to get your wish. Henry Ford has one of my favorite quotes, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. So why do we try to, we have to heal as one, the mind, body, and the spirit. So why do we try to heal, feed, and nurture them separately? This has to happen as one. So, putting it all together now. Healing is one. So I used to go out and speak about cover crops or no-till and farming, and we talked about cereal rye, and we talked about this, and we talked about that, and healing the land. That's not how you heal the land. Those are practices. We don't care about practices anymore on our farm. Our farm is about principles. We set principles. They're like our goals. And then they set precedents, and we need to make a decision to do something. Well, our principle says this. This doesn't really coincide. The practices will follow. Everybody wants to know about the practices. Set your principles. The practices will take care of themselves. We need better principles. We have to promote life on the farm. So when you wake up and that insect is attacking your tomatoes or your corn or your soybeans, maybe ask another question besides what chemical or what dusting or what tillage will do to this. My question now is, well, what eats that insect? What bird am I not promoting? What other insect am I not growing habitat for that is the predator for this insect? They're all out there. When something is attacking me, it's because I don't have enough diversity on my farm. 100% of anything that goes wrong on the farm on which we live is my fault. It's brought on by my management. And then this one hurts, because I've already said multiple times that farmers are the greatest people on earth, and I truly believe that. But we've lost our integrity, people. I know farmers that grow, I know farmers that don't eat what they grow, but they'll buy it from their organic neighbor. They won't feed it to their kids, but they'll feed it to yours. And I can't tell you how much that hurts to hear that conversation. I've heard it multiple times. We bitch about the loss of integrity in Washington. We're not going to get it back until we get it back in rural America. We're the leaders. Those aren't leaders. It's us. We are the change. We got to put integrity back into our lives, into our farms, into our communities. Washington will take care of itself. Now let's get spiritual. This is just nuts. This is my new world. This is a study that was published by the Journal of Nature, found that plants exposed to birdsong produced more leaves and flowers and grew taller than plants that were not exposed to birdsong. The researchers believe that the birdsong may be triggering a stress response in the plants, which in turn leads to increased growth. Now, we all know about singing to our plants, right? We sing to our house plants. When was the last time you sang in your garden? Yeah. So, birds are farmers, is what I read in that study. Yes, they're singing to communicate, they're singing to look for a spouse, but they're also growing their food. The plants are responding to their song. And when you look at the farms today, and when I meditate, I try to see my farm 200 years ago, 300 years ago. Because only then do I know what all am I still missing. And when you think that our big journey for this year on our farm has been sound. And when we just made that as our goal, the musicians have showed up. We have a person farm sitting for us today. He's a musician. He brought his guitar. We had a lady that Lynette works with showed up to camp last night, and she brought her ukulele. We need music. We need sound. We need vibrations. We need noise. We need frequency on these farms. And diesel isn't a noise. It's pollution. And when you think about this bird singing and growing its food, what else? What about that beaver tail smacking the water? That vibrations. I know mushrooms respond to thunder. How much noise have we removed from our farms? How many birds have we eliminated so we could grow corn and soybeans? We need them all. We can't grow healthy food without them, and they're going to help us. They're going to help us. They want to help us. This is just so incredible. This is so much more fun than going to a chemical meeting and talking about killing something. Holy crap, my birds are farming. We all claim to be environmentalists, yet we drink bottled water. We till our ground, we spray chemicals on it, we go to church and talk about being a steward. We can all do better. We all have to do better. We are vegans because we want to protect the feelings of the animals with little or no understanding of the plant's life, intelligence, and social structure. And I get it. I understand. I love to have conversations with vegans because I want to know their why. And this is the number one thing I get. Read The Hidden Half of Nature. Read the Hidden Life of Oaks. And when you understand that they now know that oak trees have a brain, the social interactions, the grieving that goes on in a timber or a prairie. And this is why we have to farm with love and grace and gratitude. Because whether you're harvesting a beef or shooting a deer or pulling a turnip, you're taking a life. And we have to do it with love and respect and gratitude. Because somebody is giving their life to nourish us, and they all have feelings. And we claim to promote social justice while we eat CAFO meat and shop at Walmart and Amazon. And this gets really difficult. I was part of Lynette and I helped co-found a group a couple years ago called Great Plains Regeneration. And part of our main goal besides education was connecting farmers with new markets and making our lives a little easier. And our first project, we looked for a mill in Kansas. We had farmers with wheat. We had bakers that were interested. We had this beautiful chain coming together to help everybody make a buck. Unfortunately, I helped kill that because I asked, well, what about the truck driver? What about the mill workers? Are we going to raise their pay? And once we paid everybody what they should get, we couldn't sell the bread. That's the ugliness of where we are today and what we're trying to fix. This isn't just about getting a little more income for the farmers. The truckers need it, the butchers need it, the bakers need it, the millers need it, we all need it. The teachers. We've got to find systems that help all. Community versus convenience. They don't feed us either. They feed the system. But when you're in rural America, 95% of the time, this is the only thing that even resembles food in the community. It's a catch-22. You talk about between a rock and a hard spot, there's no food there, yet that's all there is to eat. And the money, they have 2 minimum wage employees, and the rest of the money goes to the coast. And the small rural communities say, yay, we have a Casey's coming in. And I say, they're just the vultures circling, sucking the last bit of money out of the community. We have to find a way to do it better. We have to support the local coffee shops, which means you have to pay more, which means you have to find a way to budget, because we don't have the money, but we find a way. We know where 90+% of our food comes from, and it's not cheap. And when you're already broke, it makes it difficult, but you have to prioritize. But every farmer wants a premium for their product, and then they run to Walmart to spend their money. It doesn't work. We have to promote from within. I am one. Vote. And we all voted a couple weeks ago. Half of us were really happy, half of us were pretty pissed. And to me, that election gets a lot of headlines for no reason. Because you're going to vote 20 times today, maybe 30. And those votes count 10 times more than that one vote every 4 years. Every time you purchase food, every time you purchase a piece of clothing, every time you decide to come to a conference, you're voting how you want somebody else's life to look. Make your vote count every day. That's where we make the change. And again, how can we take responsibility for the future we are now making? Change is coming. Are we ready? Are you at one with your community? Is your community at one with you? Are you all on the same page? If your doctor prescribes you medication without first asking you about, which is what mine did with my high cholesterol and my high blood pressure, just prescribe the pills without asking me about my diet, my exercise routine, my sleep habits, my stress, my water consumption, I didn't have a doctor, I had a pill pusher. I fired him. A medical doctor uninterested in nutrition and agriculture and the wholesomeness of mind and spirit is as absurd as a farmer who is uninterested in health. Probably all of our heroes, Wendell Berry. I'm going to have to bring this up. The last time I did, the room erupted. But I will tell you, there is a lot of new research coming about psychedelics. And I'm old enough that I saw what happened in the 70s. I saw what the news told us. And like 99% of everything else, it was a lie. Psychedelics, when used properly, are a very powerful medicine. And there's new research now coming out, fortunately, showing huge benefits with PTSD, with depression, with alcoholism. I'm not telling you all to go out and do it, but when you get as depressed as I am, I want to look at all of my options. And I'm far enough down the rabbit hole to know when I've been lied to about everything else, and we've been lied to about these as well. I think they could be a very powerful tool for a lot of us going forward. And we need to look into it deeper. Severy, Kansas, there's my town. Isn't it beautiful? We can do better. Regeneration isn't just for soil, it's not just for us. I have hated the regenerative ag movement from day one because all they think it is earthworms and fungi. It's not. It's about regenerating rural America. It's about regenerating our communities. Communities can be bacteria or people or coyotes. We've got to regenerate them all together. We got to overhaul the whole system and do it really quickly. Food production, consumerism, education, government policy, energy, money, currency, religion. They've all got their place in this, and they all need We all need to change. Got to invest in ourselves. The day will come when what is ethical matters more than what is profitable. We need to make food an event again. We need regional systems. Kansas imports 90% of its food. We've got to return pride, ownership, and hope to rural America. Kids today, education forces them to fit into a box they don't fit into. We keep them inside, distracted, sick, get them into college in debt, let them think diabetes is normal. We've got to overhaul it all. Real quickly, I'll leave you some of these questions. Do you know where your food comes from? Where your clothes come from? Do you know how those workers are treated? These are the questions we need to be asking ourselves when we make purchases. Do you pay it forward? Do you have community events? Do you help strangers? Do you get out of your comfort zone? Some of us did that this morning. Not very many, though. I didn't see a lot of dancing. You got to dance. Power of the brain. How many of you guys have heard of Joe Dispenza? A couple. Joe Dispenza was a triathlete. During an event, he got hit by a car, broke his back. They told him he was going to do surgery, but he would never walk again. He passed on the surgery, and he healed himself through meditation. He literally healed the broken spine in his back through meditation, and 6 months later, he competed in another triathlon. The power of the mind is amazing. Starts with thought, starts with the gut. You got to quit beating yourself up. You got to love yourself. Say it. I love me. Louder. Keep saying it until you believe it. We're out of time, so I got to slide through some of this cool stuff to get to my ending. I see a world with no hunger. A world where wealth is measured not by how much you make or by how much you have, rather by how much you give. A world with no money, or at least money as we know it today. True wealth can't be stored in a bank. The true wealth is in the air, the water, the soil. It's biological capital. I see a world where my grandchildren are allowed to learn, but aren't educated, not made to fit into the same mold as all of the other children. In this world, I don't have to buy my way into heaven, and all are welcome at my table. And the last thing I will leave you with, personally, I talked about it being remembering. It's about letting that little kid in me that I locked up when I was 10 or 12, when my parents told me to grow up, when the teachers told me to conform, when everybody said that dragon that I saw wasn't real, and I locked that kid away. And he has been beating on that door for 50 years. Let it out. Let your kid back out. Run, sing, jump, dance. Who cares what people thought when she asked us to get up and dance? None of us did it. We were scared of what somebody would think. We're all going to be dead soon. Let's be foolish till we get there. And I'll leave you with this question. What will you do with your extraordinary chance? Because your extraordinary chance is here today. Come see us. And with that, I'm a little past my time, and I'm holding you up from lunch. I want to thank you all very much for coming. Lynette and I will be here today and tomorrow, and look forward to the rest of the conversations. Thank you.